Welcome to Inside the BACB, the official podcast of the Behavior Analyst Certification Board.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Inside the BACB. I'm Dr. Sarah Jenkins, the Certification Resource Manager, and I'm joined by Rachel Ulrich, the Director of Certification Services.
Hi there.
And Theresa Bartlett, Director of Testing at the BACB.
Hi everybody.
This episode is part of a series about the RBT certification for RBTs and applicants. This series will cover a key information about requirements to become an RBT and how to maintain the certification. We think individuals pursuing RBT certification and those already certified as an RBT will get a lot out of the series. And although this is for RBTs and RBT applicants, RBT supervisors or RBT requirements coordinators will probably get a lot out of these episodes as well. Today we're talking about the application process to become an RBT and taking the RBT exam. All right, should we dive in?
Yeah, let's do it. Yes.
Let's start by talking about the application process, what's involved and what to expect. Rachel, can you start by reviewing what this looks like?
Sure. First, and most importantly, the behavior technician needs to have a BACB account. When they create the account, they need to make sure that they are using their legal name, so maybe what's on their driver's license, rather than a nickname. This will really help them in the long run because if it's not their legal name, they'll have to submit a name change request when it's time to take the RBT exam. And the account needs to be set up in order for them to apply for an RBT.
Gotcha. So what additional documentation is needed?
There are three things that they're going to need when it comes to completing their initial application. The applicant will upload their certificate of completion for their 40-hour RBT training, the initial competency assessment form, and the RBT certification application attestation form. Once all the forms are uploaded and the names and credentials of those who signed off on all the forms are included, the applicant can submit the application and make payment.
Okay, so who completes the RBT certification application attestation form, and when are they doing it?
Yeah, so similar to the responsible assessor for the competency assessment, it needs to be someone employed at the same organization as the technician, and the attester must have an active BCABA or BCBA certification. They should complete that form no more than 90 days before that technician submits their application, and the nice thing is that the attester is notified when the attestation form is included in the submitted application, but with that said, it's still important for the technician to be in close communication with the attester after the application is submitted, just so that everybody's on the same page throughout the application process.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad we're talking about who completes each portion of the application process. It's a question that comes up really often. So a behavior technician should ultimately be the one to submit the application.
Absolutely. Supervisors and administrative team members can provide support and guidance during the application process, but it's really important for the technician to take an active role in submitting their RBT application and managing their account, given that their name's going to be the one associated with that certification, and they're responsible for complying with the ethics code and maintenance requirements.
Gotcha. Okay. So in keeping with the application process, in terms of volume, how many RBT applications does the BACB receive each week?
It feels like a million, but really we usually receive about 1,800 RBT certification applications a week.
Wow. Oh my goodness. That's a lot of applications.
Yeah.
So how long does it take for the BACB to get back to the technician with the application determination?
We say within 2 weeks, but most of the time we're getting feedback to those applicants within 2 business days.
Oh, wow, that's fast.
Yeah, we have a fantastic team reviewing these applications. If applicants are unsure where their application is in the queue, though, they can always go to the application processing page on our website, because that's updated every morning and it states what date of applications we're processing that day.
Okay, so with all those applications, I imagine not all of them are accepted. So can you talk about common reasons applications are denied?
Sure. We commonly see issues related to the timing or sequence of when requirements are completed. So, for example, if the initial competency assessment is completed before the technician completes their 40-hour training, or if the RBT certification application attestation or initial competency assessment form are completed or signed outside of the required timelines, those would be reasons why the application is denied. But a lot of times it's incomplete or inaccurate documentation. So we see documents submitted without signatures or certain boxes not marked appropriately or initials, incorrect BACB IDs for the supervisors or the assessors on the documents, or these are additional reasons that those applications would not be approved, and they're very easily preventable.
All right, so suffice it to say that behavior technicians and their supervisors just need to double check the documents to ensure they meet all the requirements before they submit.
Exactly.
If an RBT application is denied, what does the technician need to do?
Very good question. So after each application is reviewed, the applicant will receive a very detailed email. They will want to read that email very thoroughly as it clearly articulates all the next steps that they need to complete in order to proceed with their application. It's important to keep in mind, though, that all RBT application materials must be received within 90 days of that application payment date. After that point, a new RBT application and payment would be required.
Okay. So do you have any tips for behavior technicians going through this process?
The biggest recommendation is to use the resources on the BACB website, such as the RBT handbook, the supervision checklist for RBTs, the 5 must-know application tips blog. These are all really designed to help technicians and their supervisors or requirements coordinators to really understand the expectations and requirements for how to become an RBT and certainly how to maintain that certification. And also just make sure documentation is complete before submitting.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that information. Now we'll switch gears and talk about the RBT examination.
So a question that comes up is why examination is part of the eligibility requirements to become an RBT, which is an applied role. So Theresa, do you mind giving some background on the requirement itself?
Sure. In general, a certification examination provides a standardized method for evaluating someone's knowledge, skills, and abilities relevant to a specific job, in this case, a registered behavior technician. So the RBT exam assesses the understanding of foundational behavior analytic principles and concepts to ensure that individuals who ultimately hold the RBT certification are qualified to provide services to clients.
Yes, absolutely. And I also want to emphasize that RBTs work with individuals from a variety of different backgrounds who have different therapeutic needs. So understanding behavior analytic concepts and procedures will help them pivot to working with a variety of clients.
That's a great point.
Okay, so how is this exam structured?
The RBT exam itself is a 90-minute computer-based exam that consists of 85 multiple choice questions, and 10 of those questions are not scored.
All right, so for this type of exam, if a candidate needs an accommodation, what do they do?
They'll need to complete and submit an exam accommodation request form along with supporting documentation that defines their disability and outlines the necessary testing accommodation. It can take up to 14 days for the BACB to review the information and provide a determination for the request. And it's important that candidates wait to receive that determination email regarding their accommodation before they schedule an exam. Because if the accommodation is approved, that email is going to outline specific scheduling instructions that they'll need.
Okay, so that's a perfect segue to talk about the process for scheduling the exam.
Yes, once the BACB approves an individual's application, they can then create a Pearson VUE account to schedule their exam. So the Pearson VUE account is separate from the BACB account and is specific to scheduling an exam and viewing exam results.
Yes, perfect distinction. And for additional information, the BACB account is where candidates can view how many exam attempts they have remaining in their eligibility window, who their designated supervisor is, and details about the status of their certification. These are separate from the Pearson VUE account.
That's exactly it.
So are there unlimited exam appointments from which to choose?
Not exactly, and I'll explain. We actually recommend that candidates consider several test centers in their area to ensure that they have scheduling options. So when they're scheduling an exam through their Pearson VUE account, they're presented with multiple appointment choices. But something to point out is that the appointment options are presented in real time, so the dates, times, and locations candidates see, say, early in the week may not be available later in the week.
Oh, like an insider tip.
Yeah.
That's perfect. All right. Any other tips that you have for a candidate or anything they need to know about the testing process?
It's important that candidates realize that they have to bring appropriate ID to verify their identity when checking in for their exam at a Pearson VUE test center. So the name on the ID must match what they have provided in their BACB account, much like Rachel touched on earlier. If for whatever reason there's a name change, the candidate has to take care of that before they actually check into their exam because they can't do that at the Pearson VUE testing center. And candidates will not be allowed to take the exam if their ID does not match the name that was approved on their initial application.
Okay. So, and I'm glad we're circling around to this. Rachel, this might be a question for you. What's the process for updating or correcting their name?
Yeah. So candidates can initiate a request in their BACB account to change their name. So once they've submitted the request, they'll receive an email notification of any documents that are required to support the name change request. Once documents are submitted, they'll need to wait for confirmation from the BACB that the name change has been made before sitting for their exam. So the name change process can take about 3 to 5 business days. So if they've recently requested a name change, between having their application approved and for when they sit for the exam, they should really log into their Pearson VUE account and make sure that the new name is reflected in their account before their exam date.
Awesome. Thank you for that clarification. And I also want to point out that we have really great resources on the BACB website that detail what an appropriate ID looks like. And Pearson VUE also outlines ID requirements in the confirmation email they send after an exam appointment is scheduled.
That's true. It's imperative that candidates read all of the communications from both BACB and Pearson VUE to ensure that they can test successfully.
Awesome. Okay. So let's say a candidate was able to schedule their exam. Now they take their exam. How do they view their results?
Testers can usually receive their results at the test center after they complete their exam, but in the event there's a technical issue or some reason they can't get them at the test center, they can always access their exam results through their Pearson VUE account.
Cool. So we've talked about candidates having multiple exam attempts. So does that mean that they can retake the exam if they don't pass?
Yes, they can. They can retake the exam as long as they haven't exhausted all of their attempts within their eligibility window. So candidates have up to 8 exam attempts in their 12-month eligibility window, and each attempt must be at least 7 days apart.
Okay. Any other information candidates need to know about scheduling a retake?
Yeah, candidates need to wait for the BACB to verify the failed result, which can take up to 48 hours. Once verified, the retake application link will be available in their BACB account. So although they get their results immediately after they take the exam, the BACB must verify the results with Pearson VUE before a retake application link is available for them to complete in their BACB account.
Perfect.
Rachel, this may be a question for you. What happens after a candidate passes the exam? Are they able to provide services as an RBT?
Not yet. Their RBT certification is inactive until a qualified supervisor adds them as a supervisee. So it's important for them to communicate with the individual who will be overseeing their supervision, either a responsible supervisor or an RBT requirements coordinator.
Is this someone who is identified as part of the RBT application?
No, a qualified certificant can only add an RBT as a supervisee after they've passed the exam. At that point, the RBT certification is considered active, and then they may practice, bill, and represent themselves as an RBT. So to avoid a situation where the inactive RBT is billing for services, good communication with all parties involved in training, assessing, and supervising is critical.
Got it. Okay, so I'll say it again for everyone in the back. In order for an RBT certification to be active after the candidate passes the exam, a qualified supervisor must add them to their BACB account as a supervisee.
Exactly. As I've mentioned, candidates should take responsibility for their certification and communicate with those assisting them becoming an RBT.
So is anyone notified when the candidate passes the exam?
No, just the RBT, which is why it's important for that candidate to have good communication with those that oversee their service delivery.
Okay. So any advice or tips for helping to ensure this process goes smoothly?
Preparation and communication are key. So organizations can support this process by developing systems to identify or reconfirm the appropriate qualified certificates who will be completing that attestation form and who will supervise the applicants after they've passed the exam. And then they can also create a system for how the applicant will contact their supervisor after they've passed the exam. And then applicants should follow that communication plan within their organization and do so in a timely manner to limit any delay between the time they pass the exam and when they can provide services and billing as an active RBT.
All right, so super great information. And I'll actually open up this last question to both of you. For listeners interested in pursuing the RBT certification, or those that are going through the eligibility requirements right now, what are some resources that will help them on this professional development journey?
I personally can't stress enough the RBT handbook. This is a really great place to start. It has lots of details, so everyone involved in the process, from behavior technicians, the RBTs, supervisors, requirements coordinators, they know what to expect from the entire certification process.
I agree. The RBT handbook is the most helpful resource. I also want to reiterate, though, that the emails individuals receive from the BACB and Pearson VUE include critical information that can help explain the application and examination process and help manage expectations.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think we covered everything, and that brings us to the end of our time. I want to thank you, Rachel and Theresa, for joining us today, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Check out the next episode in this series. See you later.
See ya.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Inside the BACB. Don't miss future episodes. Subscribe now.